I'm Amanda Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 162 of the podcast today. So today on the show, we get to sit down and chat with Rochester native and author Christian Nisbit. Christian is in the process of putting out his latest book, Desperate for Redemption. So in this book, Christian talks about his journey to art school, where he landed himself in $80,000 of debt, his emotional struggle with that process, and now his journey through a local nursing program. So today on the podcast, we talk about Christian's writing process. We talk about the steps he's taking to get his book published, and we talk about really the emotional journey he went on throughout this process and in getting this book out. And he expects the book to be released sometime this summer, so you can look for it then. So before we launch into today's show, just a reminder that you can find these podcasts pretty much wherever you listen into podcast content. So we're on Apple Podcasts. We're also on Spotify and on YouTube, if that is your chosen method of podcast consumption. We're on our website as well, where we have many more stories of entrepreneurship, podcasts, articles, and videos. So you can find us at rochesterrising.org. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so you can find us on all those locations. All right, so now on to today's show with Christian Nisbit, talking about his new book, Desperate for Redemption. Thanks, Christian, for being here today on probably the coldest day of the year we've had so far.
Hey, Amanda, thanks for inviting me onto here. I had no issue walking over here. Actually, it builds character, honestly.
Oh my God. Yeah, Minnesotans get outside no matter what time of the year it is. Yeah, that's the crazy part. I feel like I like that we have seasons, but I feel like even in really hot climates, people still don't do stuff outside for 2 months out of the year.
No.
Like in Arizona or Texas or Florida or whatever. So choose your battles, I guess.
Yeah, most of our stuff's from June until August is when most of the events happen, and then it kind of goes quiet from September to May.
Yeah, I always feel like this is the worst time of the year for me from now until pretty much the end of March, because it's just gross outside. But
that's when you have the bright lights in your rooms. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So you're a Rochester native, right? You're from here.
Correct.
And then originally probably still have a passion for art that led you to go to art school. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, about your experience kind of growing up in Rochester and then kind of taking that step with art to the next level?
Oh, yeah, of course. So my experience growing up in Rochester, I've lived here all my life, but 2 years specifically, which are when I went to art school. Looking back, the reason why I moved, I think, was mostly because I wanted the challenge of going into a very competitive arts field. And it's a hard question that I've been trying to really think about is why exactly did I move? Because if I think logically, okay, I went to an art school, there's a lot of debt from that. I didn't have family there, so why would I make the decision to move? But I think it was mostly because I saw that there was a challenge I wanted to take. I wanted to go into a very competitive arts field. At the time, I believe this was back in 2016, roughly. So the castle wasn't a thing. It was still up for debate as far as who would take ownership of it. Would it be, what would the function of that space be? At that time, the chateau was still vacated, and there was a lot of questions going around the arts community about what we could do to greater allow people this space to perform at. And I remember there was one city council meeting where I felt that the decision wasn't going to be made for a very long time about when there would be performance arts spaces funded or encouraged. So months following that debate, although I made the decision to go to art school far before then, I think that solidified the decision because I felt like at the time, of course, things have changed now, but I felt like at that time, my only success being an artist was going to be street performing and really seeing what I could make off of that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a fair assessment. Did you, like, in that decision-making process, did you feel that you had to go through higher education because that's just like the system, or was it more you wanted to get outside of this area?
I feel like it's a combination of both.
Okay.
So looking back, there was one moment. I'm going to use this example to kind of preface the whole thing. In high school, I was in an advanced algebra class, and I met with my advisor one week just because I was kind of done with the class. And my advisor said, "Your grades are okay. Why are you dropping out of this class?" And I said, "Musicians don't need to know about algebra, so I don't need to waste my time anymore." The reason I bring that up is I think I didn't think through necessarily why college was necessary for the degree that I was seeking, and why a degree at a 4-year university where I was at was going to be necessary. Mm-hmm. So, in going back to that example I just told, that's not me saying that drop out of algebra because you want to be a musician or an artist. I would recommend you stay in there because you need math and sciences for sure. Especially me in nursing school, I'm going to recommend that for everybody. But I would say it was a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. I just felt like I had to go to college. Looking back, RCTC had a pretty good program going through as far as the liberal arts program goes. Mm-hmm. So I could have easily attended there. It's a back and forth between, yes, I had the great experiences of living in Chicago. Mm-hmm. I shadowed at the Aon building downtown for public relations. I was in the middle of that whole 7 million people crowd when the Chicago Cubs won the World Series. I was able to go to Paris for a week because of being at Columbia. But I look back and I think, yeah, great experience, but was it all worth the loan debt? And then looking back, what was the intention on necessarily going for that college? I think it was just the experience of being in Chicago at that point. It was the closest proximity I had to living downtown. And at that point, it allowed me, I think, the greatest proximity to explore the life that I thought I wanted and to actually see if that was the life that I wanted and deal with the consequences later if I discovered it wasn't the life I wanted.
Yeah. The only reason I ask that is because, I've been having a lot of conversations with people about, as a society, we push people down this path that to be successful, you have to go to a 4-year institution. And it's kind of a lot of crap, to be honest, because it's not, for some people, they need it for like the maturation process because what you're 17, 18, 19 when you get out of high school and you're not ready for like mainstream job, the workforce, and you need that time maybe to figure it out. But like you said, then you rack up massive amounts of debt while you're going through that process where it might not be necessary at the other end. And I don't know as a society if I think we're starting to move beyond that in like the line items on your resume, but I'm not sure that we're like 100% there, especially in this community. Maybe in some that are have a stronger startup community and art community that you're not looking for those things, but I feel that we're still very much looking for that box to be checked off.
And I would agree too, because you looked at the whole 17, 18 going through the maturation process. I would also throw on there that as far as judgment goes, a lot of us aren't really fully capable of making those long-term judgment skills until early 20s.
Yeah, even then.
Yeah, so even then. So we're asking these 17, 18-year-olds who, let's just say probably the highest amount of debt, assuming, they're maybe the average 17, 18-year-old, is a car loan for maybe like a used car, $5,000 to $10,000.
Yeah.
So now we're asking these teenagers to believe that the $40,000 or so that they're investing per year for a school, that's going to match up to a salary that is going to go after that debt. Mm-hmm. And then also we have 17, 18-year-olds that we're seeing with higher rates of anxiety going forward. So how is their future planning going to be affected now that they see, okay, I have $120,000 or X whatever $1,000 in debt. Mm-hmm. I've never had this before. They're telling me it's going to take me 30 years to pay this off. I have nothing to equate to what 30 years actually looks like.
I know.
So yeah, there is
it's more than your lifetime at that point.
yeah, double their lifetime for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an odd concept that so you had this passion for art, and now you're kind of following a different passion to nursing school. So do you want to talk a little bit about kind of how that switch happened and what your experience was that kind of prompted you to leave art school or to end that journey?
So I'm going to tell us from a storytelling perspective, ironically so. Through art school, I was able to go to Paris for a study abroad opportunity. And during that trip, I was also working on side marketing projects. Well, throughout that trip, one of the requirements we had was to read 2 books, one by Ernest Hemingway and the other by James Baldwin. But we had about 2 weeks or so, meaning that those 2 weeks, and we also had to write during those 2 weeks too. So those 2 weeks were pretty much just writing and reading intensive, but we also wanted to explore Paris. For me, I was working on side marketing projects and wanted to make sure that I had an income to at least survive until I returned back to Rochester that May. I wanted to at least have some fun and also, not have the worry that I'm going to have to skip meals from January until May. So during that period of time, there was one assignment that made me feel like I really don't want to do this anymore. I remember we had to give our reactions to Paris for one of the final classes. And I said to my professor, look, I really don't care about this anymore. And I sent an email to my advisor saying, could I just switch up? I know it's late in the game. I graduate in May. Is there anything we can do? Can I apologize to the PR department? Pieros. That's a little French lip slip right there. Can I apologize to the PR department and say I made a mistake? I should really return to that major. Could I do that? And my advisor said, no, it's too late at this point. You're graduating soon. You can't do it. Mm-hmm. And I guess for me, it was so heartbreaking when I was graduating, because here I have my mom and my aunt who I would visit pretty much my last semester every weekend because I was so homesick. And I was dropped a letter grade because I broke the attendance policy. You're only allowed 3 days, actually. And I left every weekend because I wanted to be home.
Yeah.
So then here's this scene, right? This juxtaposition of me graduating, supposedly celebrating this moment, shaking the hand of my professor. Meanwhile, my mom and my aunt, especially my mom in this scene, because I had to sign Parent Plus loans to even go to this college. So she's in the balcony cheering me on, and all I can think of is how guilty I am as a son to look at her and say, you know what? You're also signing your future off with me. And I have no way out of this. I have no plan forward, nothing at this point. So then we move back. I come back to Rochester that immediate May, and I look at my options. At first, I decide to go back to RCTC to pursue a marketing degree because, again, that's where I was at that moment. And I said, I just need something because there's a little loophole that says if you take more than 6 credits, you can delay your student loans for at least a little bit until you find something. But for some reason, at that time, I was going back to a job I had where I was working in kind of a healthcare capacity.
Okay.
And I don't know what it was, but for some reason I decided, you know what keeps me here the most, but also gives me a salary that satisfies the history that I have right now. And then I had a conversation with a few people, and they told me the nursing program would be perfect for me. So the odd part is, through scholarships and all of that with a community college for RCTC, I could relatively go to a nursing program for not much out of pocket, which I guess is how I justify all the stuff with going to art school. And then all through that, I had this educational kind of deficiency going on because my school never focused, the art school, never focused on any of the maths and sciences. So I lost all of my knowledge for chemistry, right?
I don't have any either, and I'm a former scientist. You lose it if you don't use it.
Yeah, you do. Sure. I agree, you lose it. My partner, I feel bad for saying this, but my partner she had a crush on me at the time, and like I knew about it, but I was terrible at chemistry.
We have all done this.
Yeah, we have all done this, so let's own up and fess up.
Yeah.
So we have a group project, right, or a group quiz, and I'm doing like a twirling my hair kind of thing. I'm putting my arm above my head because I got no idea how to do this anymore. But she caught on quickly, and I had to actually be an honest student and do well. It only lasted 2 weeks, so I was only dishonest for that 2-week period. But it was just for one little assignment. That was it. But anyway, going back to educational deficiency here, my art college never focused on the sciences. So I had to relearn everything that was taught in high school. And then I was thrown into anatomy and physiology, which is one of the hardest nursing program preliminary classes you take.
Yeah. There's a lot of parts.
A lot of parts,
a lot of bones, a lot of muscles, yeah.
Yeah, and then you got, the stuff with the heart, stuff with the nervous system, the brain. So I guess gradually it became a competition for me. It became a challenge of, could I do this? Could I go from this, at the time, $80,000 in debt, starving art school student, to pretty much having my career, my educational future, my reputation and it's not like my family had an issue with me. They welcomed me back with open arms. It was my perceived reputation for me being a family member. When I say this, my belief of who I am as a son, my reputation as a citizen here, I believe all had to be earned back realistically by me doing well in the program. So, and you ask also how the book project kind of came about from that. Mm-hmm. Really, that was my way of staying focused on that whole entire thing, of looking back and at first it was going to be this kind of like Shakespearean project because I took a class in Shakespearean tragedies and kind of wrote like that a bit. But then it became this whole diary of, okay, going to art school, worst mistake ever made in my life, but I'm sure going to make sure that I make my pardons, that I do well at this, and redeem my future through that, which is where the title of the book came from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, desperate for redemption, right? Mm-hmm. So you wrote this book. It's getting out there next week, right?
I didn't know that it takes 3 months to copyright books.
Okay, I was going to ask you more about, so I have no idea. So like, what was that process like? So like when you're sitting down to write it, like, how long did that take you?
Mm-hmm. Well, interestingly enough, I have a complicated relationship with writing as a whole based off, what I've been through with school. So I can't be at a desk and sit for probably more than 10 minutes and write something.
And you shouldn't be boxed in like that as a creative, I don't think.
Oh, no, not at all. So what I've done is my desk space is pretty much dedicated to just nursing education stuff. But when you're at the gym, you're supposed to take a little bit of a rest period, right?
Yeah.
Well, instead of scrolling on my phone or scrolling across like Instagram feeds, I decided midway that I was just going to write the entire book off of that. So every day I would probably get about 5 paragraphs or so. And then if I added cardio to it, that 5 paragraphs would turn into maybe 15 to 20 or so. But yeah, that's honestly how I started getting the whole book project.
That's incredible. Yeah. So you just have like a notebook and you're like writing, or do you like dictate?
Not even a notebook. It was just the memo section of my phone.
Nice. Wow. So you're just like typing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So like if people would come up to me and say, hey, stop scrolling your phone. You've been on it too long.
That's a hell of a text.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was a long text. I would be like, trust me, I'm actually doing something meaningful here.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting because we, think you have to have this, I don't want to even call it structure, but like just procedure. Like, I don't know, like last year I got into meditating because I had way too much stress in my life. And like, we think we need this like quiet, dark room with like a sage candle. And it's like, no, like you can walk and like do meditate. Like you don't need this box structure of, so yeah, I think that's incredible. I would never, have thought that would be possible. But I guess you're like, your endorphins are going, your brain's firing on all cylinders. And I've heard a lot of people say that, like, I run a lot, used to run more. And I read a lot of blogs and stuff because it's a big community. But people would, like, do all this planning and, like, have all these visions for, like, business on runs. And I'm like, that's my time to like shut down my brain.
Yeah.
So, but I'm just like, nope, nothing. There's just, sometimes I listen to music, sometimes I don't. And normally I don't think of anything. But yeah, it's just different processes.
Yeah, and it's odd how it comes up of sometimes you'll have something that comes up and sometimes you won't.
Yeah.
You know, I was listening to a Simon Sinek video actually this morning, which is interesting because it's about creativity and saying that it happens at random moments. So I like that you push the conversation that way.
Yeah, so I was listening to, so, you know, you brought up that maybe not yourself, but a lot of people are like terrified of writing. Like it's the hardest thing because it, you know, does require, whether you write in a structured manner or, well, it has to make sense as a whole. And one of the podcasts I do listen to a lot is, it's called Gold Digger. It's, her name's Jenna Kutcher. She's actually pretty like self-made millionaire, grew up, they live in like Duluth and go between Duluth and Hawaii. But anyway, she did a live coaching session with her coach, and her coach told her, you need to write a book. And she's like, no. So I don't know, besides, how did you stay focused on delivering a narrative? Or was it just like, just get everything out and sort through it later?
So it was, I would say, I'll talk about the purpose behind it first, and then I'll go about the process with it. So I guess the purpose with it first was, one, I thought about satisfying the guilt of going to art school and thinking, I spent all this time into this, I need something out of it, whatever it is, I just need something. And then it focused on, if this project were to work out, could it potentially produce the income I need to at least pay down the debt that my mother attached to my name? Never mind the fact that, you know, whatever's attached to my name, I'll go through nursing school, get all that done. It's the guilt of whatever's on her. So that motivated me to stay on task with it, because I think throughout the book and whenever it's produced, it'll take a few months at least, but whenever it's produced, that's what's probably going to be the most prevalent theme throughout, is the motivating force between knowing that you have to make amends for what happened in the past, and really what comes out of that. And then after what comes out of that, how do you change it from I'm apologizing for what I've done to this is a reclamation of my future? So I think that's what kept me motivated and focused on a steady streamline of events. And there were a lot of things that went back and forth. Mostly it was just a diary of whatever happened between March 2018 and October 2019, focusing on the most important, significant events and using a storytelling maneuver to figure out what makes sense between each scene together.
So you talked a little bit about this, but after you write it, like what are the next steps and what resources do you find locally? Like you said, copywriting, how do you even get it out there? So what did you find here, and what does that process look like?
What I thought about the process was that, and from a creative writing perspective of the education I have, it was mostly you write something, you send it to a prospective publisher, you wait, you'll probably get rejected. Don't worry, everyone else does, is what they tell you. And that may take months. I sat on a publication board during my last semester, and they sent, all the people submitting stuff, they sent it in like September, October, and we didn't get back to them until, November, December. And it was, pretty compact writing. It wasn't extensive. So usually that's kind of the traditional path. But when I had marketing experience, I was tied up with a lot of business structures and a lot of administrative business task management type things. So the process I have is really structured to that. You create the product. It's kind of like, a social media team, if I would put it lightly. You create the product. You figure out, how do I distribute the product to the right amount of audiences? How do I continue marketing the steady stream of the steady narrative to get outreach for this product while I'm figuring out how to distribute it? Right now, what I'm tied up in is, of course, the copywriting aspect of it. I got hooked up with, so the guy that did the tattoo that I have on my forearm, it's of a syringe, and there's two scalpels, and it looks like an anchor. The guy that did that, I'll throw his name out there because I want him to get as much attention as possible. Nick Sinclair of Sacred Heart Studios. I asked him, you do tattooing. Do you also do book covers too? So I've been reaching out to him to do the book cover for me, to do that. I'm thinking about doing Amazon Kindle for at least the first probably 3 to 6 months until I generate enough income to actually make hard copies. Throughout the marketing experience too, there was a realtor from somewhere in Arizona that wrote a book, and I've been referring to her every now and then of, okay, how did you do it like this? Just to make sure that, I learned from any of the tips that she has to share with me. So I became attached with a few sort of, I would say, very non-traditional writers. They just wrote it and they produced it on their own and are distributing on their own.
Yeah, I think like you said, processes are more accessible now and you can go around them. Do you have an estimate of when you think it'll be out on Kindle then that people can find it, and then how will they find it?
So I'm thinking of, if it takes 3 months for the publication, and I say this pending whatever happens with nursing school next week. I got Noah. They gave me an entire box full of books, so we're going to see what happens there. But I should have it by the time summer happens for sure. I'm going to shoot for just an early estimate of May. To all the future writers out there, copywriting is an extensive process. So please know that before you start sending out dates of when you're actually going to publish something out. But copywriting also ensures that you're safe and that you make the money that you deserve, because you could send it out there, but if without copywriting, you have no guarantee.
I don't think most people would even think about the necessity of copywriting. Yeah. So it's a good, everything's always a lesson learned too from all processes. So, you're sitting here now, you've made it through school, you had the courage to look at it and say, this isn't where I want to go. This is what I want to do. And then going through this process of writing this book. So how do you feel about things now, differently than 2 years ago? Or what are your thoughts at this point?
So let's see, my thoughts at this point. To answer that, let's revisit how I felt 2 years ago. So at this point, actually, interestingly enough, the reason I wanted to produce the book by next Monday is I remember January 13th, 2018, it was probably one of the worst days of my Paris experience. So again, that whole reclamation idea. So wait, what was the question again? I kind of got lost.
Just how you feel at the moment after, the life changes you've made.
So the life changes I've made, and thanks for pushing me back on that point, because I would have rabbit-tailed somewhere else. I feel very proud of where I'm at this point. It's interesting going back and saying, yeah, I could have done this a whole lot differently. I could have looked back and I could have been like, you know what? Maybe I should have toured more than just one college before committing on one college.
I toured 2.
Oh, okay, you toured 2. Well, at least you had the second one to kind of contrast a little bit.
Maybe it might have been 3, but that was it.
Well, I mean, you had more than I did. And, looking back, it's like, yeah, I could say that. I could say this and that. But I truly believe that, fundamentally, if I look at it, just the numbers specifically, just the numbers, I got the student loan debt, but I'm also headed towards a career that's more than well going to make up for that in a city that I couldn't choose a better place to be born into to pursue a nursing program. Part of me was thinking, because I was still in the whole, I love Chicago as a city. Do I go to Northwestern? Do I start RCTC? But it's a no-brainer. I'm staying here. And I actually feel proud about everything that's taken place. I feel comfortable knowing that eventually this will all work out. And I feel proud knowing that I at least believed in myself enough to take that risk. Yes, I crashed and burned, but the greatest thing I have from crashing and burning is the resiliency to know that I can recover. Before I took my CNA test, at the beginning of this podcast, you said it the coldest day of the year.
Yeah.
Well, little story time here about my CNA test. It was the coldest day of the year for last January.
It's pretty cold.
Yeah, we're talking
negative 40 or so.
Yeah, of course, negative 40. We had cars stalled out on the roads. My mom's vehicle, because at the time I I don't know if I had the most reliable vehicle or I just didn't have the gas money to get there, but my mom's vehicle didn't have heating.
Oh.
So we had to wake up every 2 or 3 hours to start the vehicle up.
Car.
Yeah, and we had to make sure all the vents were covered, everything. So my test out was in Winona. So we had to drive at 60 minutes. And midway through, I pulled out my phone. This is book writing mode. I'm still using my memos at this point. And the quote that I wrote was, and I was listening to August Burns Red at this point, so of course it sounded like a metal breakdown. Yeah, heavily influenced. The quote was, though exhaustion endures until midnight, resiliency returns by morning. Mm-hmm. And for me, my entire 2018 was that entire first half of that quote was exhaustion enduring until midnight. This constant, okay, we got to reset. We're going to have to humble ourselves back down. Let's be a freshman again. To now we have the resiliency to know we can recover back into this and make it through it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think you should be really proud of where you are right now because, yeah, it takes a lot of work to look at things and a lot of harsh reality and say, this isn't where I want to be going. How do I change this path? So, yeah, and things will work out. Everything's a lesson.
Yeah,
every experience is worth it, but it's like, how do we get to where we, feel that we need to be?
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
Yeah. Well, I wish you a lot of luck getting the book out over the next few months. And yeah, excited to see what happens. I just have a few questions for you to take us to the end. I've been asking these to everybody, and I changed them up for 2020, so you get the new set.
Okay, I feel honored by that.
All right. So I feel like you're a big reader. So what are you reading or listening to right now?
I'm assuming textbooks is off limits, right? That's the easy answer.
Well, I understand that too. I've been through that.
Okay, so if that's off limits, because that's the easy answer.
What textbook are you reading?
Just for fun. Just for fun. That's how you know you're in an intensive program. As you say, I read textbook for fun. I have one textbook that. So originally, when I applied for art school, I had to forfeit my attendance just because I had some things come up, and I got I selected the alcohol and drug counseling program.
Okay.
So I have this textbook called Pharmacology of Addiction or Psychopharmacology that goes over all the different drugs and how they affect people mentally. So like not just the illegal illicit drugs, but also the medicinal drugs. So I've been kind of rereading that every now and then. Other books I've been rereading, I'll religiously reread Great Gatsby over and over again, even though I know what happens. Yeah. The ending will still kind of get me as far as, the quote, the whole, we beat on like boats borne back into the sea or something like that. Like that quote will still get me with the context of what happens. I'm not going to release any spoilers, even though, the 100-year anniversary is coming up pretty soon.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I think it's 1923.
I guess,
24.
yeah, we're in the roaring 20s again.
Yeah, I hope I kind of hope, the roaring 20s come back like they were. But yeah, that's probably the book that I'll reread every now and then. Other than that, that's a really hard thing for me to answer, actually, of like what books. I've been getting more into watching movies too. So Good Will Hunting is one that somebody referred to me when I was in art school, and I watched it once, but I wasn't a late night person because I would wake up super early in the morning then. So I have now been watching it over and over and over again and taking away a different context every time I watch it. So I'm getting more into watching movies and looking at them through not just a passive, I'm going to pop some popcorn in my mouth and, sit back for 2 hours, but more of what does this say sort of perspective and looking at it kind of like it's literature. So I would say that's what I've been listening to more. If we look at podcasting, I've been listening to a lot of videos from The Rock.
Nice. Are those motivational or?
I would say, yeah, a lot of them are. I had one of the goals that I had last year. We'll see if it happens, pending all the things that I got. But I saw Titan Games for the first time last year when I think season 1 was last year.
Okay.
So I thought, I want to do that. So I've been watching and listening to the Rock's videos to kind of think, okay, maybe I could do that. That's not me saying I'm going to do that. I'm not like putting any goals out there. That's just an interest at this point.
Nice. Yeah, you got to be diversified in your listening and reading.
Oh yeah, of course.
What's your favorite spot in Rochester? And somewhere in your house is an acceptable answer.
My bed is an acceptable answer. No. Let's see. What's my favorite spot that I've been to? So, can I answer a favorite spot of Chicago and then go back? Okay, I'll reverse back into that. So, there was a spot whenever I don't know, things got tough or whenever, things were great, both of which I would always sit on the kind of the shoreline between Lake Michigan and where there's the metal graters or the metal, shelving units that they have there that you can kind of perch yourself on, that seagulls kind of sit on. So I would sit there, take my socks and shoes off and just like put my feet into the lake. So what's the equivalent to that feeling though here that I've had?
I wouldn't put any feet in Silver Lake.
That's a good point.
No, not at all. I just wouldn't.
I wouldn't either. No. I guess what's my equivalent? My equivalent probably to that would be, I think I've always, because I live pretty close to downtown and with me having clinicals at Mayo now, I'll be walking around downtown pretty frequently. So I think just taking my usual route around downtown, usually it's kind of like 2nd Street, Two-Piece Plaza. If we're feeling kind of good that day, we're going to go all the way to St. Mary's. If we're not, we're just going to wander around for that area. So I think it's mostly wandering around the downtown is kind of something that's like my go-to spot of the area.
Yeah. I used to always see you, might have been a few years ago at this point, but riding your bike past Soldiers Field.
Yeah.
Because I'd run there in the morning with my dog. And you're not kidding. You were an early rock because it was probably like before 7.
Oh yeah, it was. Back then, what I would do is, again, I had no vehicle, so I had to pretty much bear it out. And I would take my bike. I would bike like 15, 20 minutes, easy cardio, right? When you have to do it by necessity.
Oh yeah.
I would take my bike, go to the gym over by the Crossroads Center. I go to a different one now. That's a different one.
Yeah, I'm sad that one shut down.
Yeah, that was sudden. That was real sudden. But thankfully, the one that I go to now, they opened up probably a month afterwards, and they cater to pretty much the same audience.
Is it the one that's...
an Old Fish and Pets?
Yeah.
Yep, Iron Physique is the one.
I couldn't think of the name of it, yeah.
Yeah, so, I would bike there at really early times in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah, I was so sad that Edge Fitness shut down because I lived right around the corner. And you're right, it was super sudden. Like, we went in to work out one day, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, they're telling you that there's a notice on the door or something like that.
Oh, I just loved it so much. It was, and what's one key resource you found here in the community, whether it's for your book or for school or something like that?
That's a good question. So one valuable resource I've had in this community, I'm going to list a few because there's probably a few that come to mind. The greatest resource that I've had is obviously my family. With the context of the loans they took on, and again, if you're a prospective college student, I would research these loans and research just how vicious they can go after you and your family after you're all gone from college. But, my mom for letting me stay at the house rent free. She helped me with my resume building and all of that. She helped me with CNA training, all of that. So my family has been the greatest resource. Looking at other resources, however, I would say with the marketing experience I had a few sort of entrepreneurial connections. And having those people, I'm not going to say quote unquote in my back pocket because it's not that context whatsoever. It was legitimately I care about you. Mm-hmm. I'm not just using you as like a career advancement kind of moment. I truly believe that every person that I've met through my entrepreneurial experiences here, which I did from like 2016 to 2018, I could reach out to on a moment's notice, whether it's, hey, let's go to a restaurant and let's just talk for an hour. I truly believe that the entrepreneur community here is more like that than what I've seen in other places and communities. So they're another resource I would say that I've reached out to every now and then. especially when I've questioned, okay, from a distribution process perspective, how do I get this book started? I mean, even my artist that I reached out to was from somebody that I at first met through entrepreneurial connections. The third connection too is professors that I had when I attended art school. The fortunate thing for me is it's not all a loss, because the professors I had, and these are all business management professors, which it's interesting that when I started freelancing and all of that, I reached out to them because they had seminars and classes, and they really helped me get started in that field. So I reached out to them. They helped write letters of recommendations for me. And I would say I would use that to say to someone listening to this right now that even if you went to a school that was a loss for you personally, and yeah, from the numbers perspective, you're taking this big loss, there are still people who you can reach out to that from that school. And, maybe for you personally, there's a lot of scorn going from that school, a lot of bad blood thrown in. I get it. I have it too. I've had nothing but bad blood emails back and forth with administrative staff from this school. So I understand it. I get it. What I will also add, though, is if you're able to have a heart-to-heart with any professor from that college, they're going to have that heart-to-heart with you. So that's another resource that I've had that has been tremendous, unexpected too. Unexpected that I could reach back out to that school and, have those professors reach out to me, not from a professor perspective, but look, I was concerned about you when you went to my school, and I just want to know that you're doing well.
Yeah, I think in the end, people are people.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone has empathy, or most people, the majority of people.
I agree.
That was my final question for you. I'll ask you for any final thoughts and where people can keep up with what you're doing.
I guess final thoughts that I have are, looking at the whole book project as a whole and looking at it. My final thoughts just rest on that quote that I said before about, though exhaustion endures until midnight, resiliency returns by morning. One, because I'm very happy that I made that, being a creative writing major, I'm proud of that one. But, all kidding aside and all seriousness, that's the main theme of this book is that there's a lot of media thrown around about just how terrible it is. And yes, I get it. It is terrible. Thankfully, the job that I had being a CNA, because of the workplace shortage that we have locally right now, I was able, and it's crazy when I consider how I was able to do this. I was able to work 50 hours in 3 days off 4 hours of sleep between each shift because I knew fundamentally that if I didn't get ahead of my student loans, the interest would bury me. So yes, there's that if you're not able to get ahead of it within, I would say, a 5-year window, the likelihood of you becoming one of those stories that's on the news, yeah, that might be increased. But I would also say that there are ways out of it. And, this also can go into a mental health thing too, of the current graduating class as far as the age goes. And, I had people in my classes that were 60s, 70s. So this isn't saying that isn't possible. There's actually studies shown that older adults are going back to school because they kind of want to change up in careers, or let's say the career that they had is now no longer needed. The current age that we're seeing that commonly goes to college has high anxiety rates, high depression rates, high suicide rates. And I do not believe, based on my experience, that most colleges really care. Based on, I had a conversation with the president of my college, and actually I didn't have a conversation because I was being wired back and forth between people. And I finally just said, you know what, you're not the person I want to talk with, but I'm going to have a conversation. And I told them the experience that I have had, how humiliating it's been to be at family dinner tables and think, and this is going to go on kind of like a dark side. So if that is all worrisome for you, you might want to skip ahead a few seconds. But to actually thoughtfully consider, is my family better off with me not being at the table next year? And I went into that school administrator and said, I honestly hope that you never have that experience being a child.
Right.
Saying, I actually think that this is a better alternative. So what I would say to counter that also is to say, no, that's not the better alternative. Although you might have the humiliation that I can definitely associate with the opportunities I've been granted here, I am ever so grateful for. And I am blown away that in a 2-year time span, that all of this looks like it's going to be reversed. And that's a powerful thing right there, that there are so many opportunities out there. And again, communities change based off, if I was in the deep Rust Belt and, my family was struggling to survive week per week, maybe this wouldn't be as realistic for me. So there's that to throw on the table too, but I'm just so blown away by the opportunities that have been presented to me living here. And I would say, as a final conclusive note, that it is possible to be able to overturn all of this, that even though this current student loan situation may or may not change, I feel like I'm going to be quoting the final section of the book too, but we'll go for it. Even though the current student loan situation probably will not change for a while until we have a deep recession and colleges say, okay, students aren't deciding to go here. Maybe we should take notice of why they're not deciding to go here. What I want for people going through what I've gone through is to look at that college degree they have or whatever they think is a failure notice and look at that more as a demarcation of that's where you've been, but where you're about to go and where you could go far exceeds what you could have gotten solely based on what you have.
Yeah, I always think, a single decision or a single experience never defines us as a whole. We've all done, we've all made decisions that we're not happy with.
Oh, yeah, of course. And so there's a picture they put out there, and I had a quote on there that's from F. Scott Fitzgerald that says, and I know I'm going to misquote it because I don't have it by memory, is vitality is not only found in, it's something about vitality is found in the ability to overcome, pretty much, the ability to persist on, and that a final defeat or a first defeat's not the final defeat. I don't know. F. Scott Fitzgerald has a couple of quotes that are like that, but it definitely reminds me of that, of a single defeat, although as deep as it could be, although as circumstantially damning as it could be, it's not the final defeat.
No. Nope. Totally agree. You are a huge Fitzgerald fan, huh?
Yeah. I'm surprised I don't have his quote tattooed on me at this point, honestly.
The next one.
Yeah, the next one, probably.
So, well, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your story. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Amanda, for featuring me on here.
Thanks so much for Christian for being on the show today. And just a reminder, you can look for this book to be released sometime this summer. We're always looking for stories of great Rochester entrepreneurs to share on the podcast and in our article and video content. So if you know of a great entrepreneur in this community, let us know. Send us an email at rochesterrising@gmail.com. That's a wrap for today's podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen in to your podcast content so that you never miss a story of entrepreneurship and innovation coming out of Rochester, Minnesota. We'll see you here again next Wednesday with a brand new episode.